We're so glad that you've joined us for this week's message from Anchor Chapel in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Our hope is that you're both encouraged and challenged in your relationship with Jesus. Be blessed as you listen to this week's message.
And so a couple days ago, I had a friend of mine who was from New Orleans, and he recently planted a church. He wanted to go eat somewhere, so he said, "Hey, I'll meet you in Baton Rouge. Let's go eat. Let's just catch up and see how things are going." So he comes into town, and I take him to an all-you-can-eat sushi place for lunch. I don't know if you've done all-you-can-eat sushi for lunch or for dinner, but it changes the way that you think about yourself a little bit. Two things: I didn't know I could eat that much. I didn't know I could be that much of a glutton. But the second thing is, all of a sudden you feel like a king. Like you're in there, and I'm looking at the menu, and I'm like, I'll take one of those. And I'll take one of those. Oh, and hold on, waiter. I'll take one of these as well. Now bring me the plethora of food and you feel so different because who does that in real life? It's similar to a buffet, I guess. You can just go and just eat what you want, but somebody's bringing it to you, and it's sushi, and it's all you want. And it's like you become, for the hour that you're there, you become a monster. You become like the worst version of yourself because you're like, serve me all that I could possibly imagine right now in this moment. And I was just thinking about that, whenever you've got this menu in front of you and you've got so many choices, it easily can make you feel like, you know what, I could get used to this. I could really get used to this kind of a life. And when there's so many options in front of you, I believe that what happens is the struggle that we're talking about today really comes to the surface, and it reveals something about you. It reveals the lust of the eyes to you. That there's not anything, and whenever you are struggling and you have this lust of the eyes issue, and we'll talk about kind of what that means today, but whenever you have this struggle and you're in the middle of the lust of the eyes struggle, you become a different person. You think so inwardly. You think so much about yourself and how you can bring yourself pleasure, and it's very tied to the lust of the flesh, but it is seeing things that you want that maybe you don't have yet. Maybe it's something that someone else has. The lust of the eyes is dangerous because it pulls our attention from where it should be. It's the lust of the eyes because you can only look at one thing at a time. Even though you have two eyes, you need both to focus. And whenever you are struggling in an issue with your eyes, here's what happens. Your attention is drawn away from the things of God. I want to look at the verse in 1 John 2 that talks about all these three areas of lust that we deal with. John writes this. He says, do not love the world or the things of the world, or if anyone loves the world, then the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away in the lust of it, but he who does the will of God abides forever. Last week when we read this, I brought out and mentioned that it mentioned 6 times that there is the lust and the desire of the world, and then there is the will of the Father. And the lust of the eyes is one of those struggles that is in direct opposition to the will of God. It is the opposite of what God wants for your life. So anytime that you give into any of these 3 major areas, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, or the pride of life, then these 3 things steal your gaze from God's will for your life. And I know it sounds like, okay, well, we just won't do that anymore, right? Well, the lust of the eyes is incredibly enticing. But if you invest and you let yourself be dragged away by the lust of the eyes, then your life, along with those lusts, will be passing away. And your life and your focus will have been on the wrong things all of your life, and your life will not have amounted to much because your gaze was stolen by the things of this world. Now, John is writing, and he says, look, there's a better way to live. There is a desire that we should all have. There is a thing you should fix your eyes on, and that is the will of God. What does the will of God look like in opposition to the lust of the eyes for this week? I think that, we often wonder. Last week I kind of gave you an answer that is very difficult for us to deal with anyone who deals with temptation at all. Really, the answer is this, that when you lift the eternal over the temporal, then temptation loses its flavor. And while that's true, it's very difficult. But if you can think of the eternal over the temporal, the will of God over the lust of the eyes, then you won't have a problem with the lust of the eyes. You won't have a problem with the lust of the flesh or the pride of life. But those things are way easier said than done. But that's why Jesus did it for us. So he could make an example, so he could show us exactly how it is done. And Jesus' advantage over temptation was that he came from heaven. He saw God. He knew God. He believed why he was sent. And that was his advantage. And so many Christians don't really believe that there's a future for them, a hope for them. They don't believe that eternity is any more real than this world. And that's why we get stuck in temptation, and that's why we get stuck in things of this world, because we don't see the things of God. We don't see heaven. We don't know that it's reality. So Jesus knew it, and this is what happens in Luke 4. Luke 4, chapter 4, verses 5 through 8, is really the second temptation that Satan, Jesus' enemy, our enemy, brings before Jesus. And Jesus is tempted first by the lust of the flesh. He was asked by Satan, why don't you just turn this stone into a bread? And Jesus, of course, argues that. And if you want to catch the whole thing, go back and look at the podcast from last week. But this week, we're going to look at the second temptation. This is what it says in verse 5. It says, then, after he couldn't get him with the first temptation, it says, then the devil took him up and revealed to him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. So can you imagine the overload of all of the things you could possibly want, all of the kingdoms, all of its riches at one time? Look at all of it. So Satan takes Jesus. He shows him everything at one time. He says, I will give you the glory of these kingdoms. Look at these kingdoms. Look at everything here. Look at the power that you would possess. Look at the riches that you would have. Look at the people that you would rule. I would give you these kingdoms and the authority over them, the devil said, because they are mine. Because they're mine. And I give to anyone that I please. Verse 7, he says, I will give it all to you if you will worship me. Verse 8, Jesus replied, the scriptures say, you must worship the Lord your God and serve him only. You know, I think is amazing about this is that what Satan does to Jesus here is the same exact thing he does to you, same exact thing he does to us every day, is he wants to take everything that you could possibly lust for, everything that you could possibly want, and make it so enticing that you can't say no. He shows Jesus, he says, look at everything in the world, look at all the kingdoms. I own them all, and I give to who I want. Of course, Jesus knew that Satan was on borrowed time and borrowed authority on this earth. Jesus was really thinking, it's really all mine, but nice try. So he gives him this temptation before him, and he says, look, everything that you see, all of the riches, all of everything you can imagine, everything you can want, it's mine and you can have it. It's an overload. How many times has this happened in your life? In this world that you are bombarded by all of these things, all of these ads. You've got to have this. You need this or you won't be happy. And I think it's so creepy that you can get on Facebook and Facebook knows what you want. There'll be ads on the side of Facebook, and there'll be all these little things like suggested posts. What that means is, I'll tell you what suggested post means. It means, look at all the kingdoms of the world. It's mine to give you. Look at the authority I can give you because it's mine. I think that what this world and what you don't understand is that every temptation that you face, when you look at those ads and you feel that in your spirit, that I've got to have it, it's the same thing Satan did to Jesus. Look what I have that I can give you. I give. Now we know that Jesus is the giver of life. But Satan wants to substitute himself and his part-time authority and his part-time ownership of things in this world. He wants to substitute that and say, I am the giver of life. Here is what will make you happy. Here is what will bring you satisfaction. But Jesus, of course, knew this wasn't true, but we fall for it all the time. A couple of months ago, we went to the Balloon Festival in Gonzales. Whenever that happened, I think it was at the end of the year last year. It's really cool. There's tons of balloons out there, and they do like a fair, and it's really fun. So we go out there, and we take the kids, and Judah is like freaking out. Balloon, balloon, balloon. He wasn't saying balloon. He was saying balloon at the time. So just balloon, balloon. And he was seeing that. He was pumped. Brooklyn was pumped. They're all excited. There's this fair thing going on. We had family out there. And you know what was crazy is that there's so many things to do. You're like, what do you want to do? I don't know. There's so many things to do. And like you finally like choose something, but then like you're like, okay, we're done with that. Let's go look at at this one, and we're, okay, now we're done with that. Let's go look at this. Let's go try to win something. And there's just so many things, so much chaos. It tries to steal your attention. And one of the rides that we ended up going on was this large slide that you get like on this burlap sack, and you just slide down this slide. So we go and we get in line, me and Brooklyn and Judah, and we're all going to go together. And as we get close to the edge of this slide, and there's a ladder going up the side, I get close to the bottom, and I notice that where you're going to land at is kind of just this really rickety plastic pieces put together that form this slide. Well, the last section of it was separated from the rest of the slide. Like it's supposed to overlap the next, the lower one, so that, nothing gets caught on the way down. Well, the last one wasn't overlapping at all. It was separated by a couple of inches. So I'm thinking as I'm going up this slide, I'm like, man, if somebody's trying to catch their balance and their finger slides in there, you're going to rip your finger off or at least break it pretty seriously. So I get up to the top and I tell Brooklyn, whatever you do, hold your hands close to your side. Do not put your hands on the ground. And I'll get up there with Judah and I'm like, let's all go together. I'm going to try to all go together. And so I get Judah, and as we go down, we kind of go off the end, and I don't want Brooklyn to get too far ahead of me, and I'm holding Judah like this the whole time. I'm like, don't put your hands down. We're just going to fall. I might end up on my face coming down this thing, but we're going to protect the family as we come down. So we slide down, and as you can see in the last one, we finally I'm trying to keep everybody together as we're sliding down this thing, because I see the danger in this crack at the bottom. I'm thinking about it now, but I didn't even tell the carnies or whatever they are that there was a crack in the bottom. I'm scared of those guys. I'm like, I don't know where you've been, bro. But sorry if you're a carny professionally. But I'm just like, I'm coming down this thing, and I'm like, man, it's so dangerous. And how many times, though, I'm just thinking about the whole experience. How many times, though, is our attention so enamored by all the things in life? We're so caught up in all the possibilities, all the things that you could have, that you can't see the danger that you're sliding into. That there's oftentimes there's something you gotta have, the new electronic, the new piece of clothes, the new shoes. I'm a shoe guy. I gotta have, I want to have a nice pair of shoes, but I will force myself to live on budget, to make sure that we are getting deals all the time, because I have a tendency to just want to buy what I see. Brooke she's the one who's disciplined. She's the one who makes wise choices. If we had unlimited money, I would have everything I could possibly want. This is a struggle for me. And what I notice is that as we are disciplined and as we try to make wise decisions for financial purposes, I notice that if I don't let my gaze be stolen by all the possibilities, then something more than just saving money happens, but my soul is in a better place. My soul is healthy because I'm not feeding it whatever it wants. See, what it means to follow Jesus is that you don't live and get whatever you want and fill your desires and your wants, but instead you live outside of yourself, that you live a life that is bigger than yourself, not focused on yourself. And this is what the lust of the eyes does, is it makes you focus inwardly. Here are kind of some things that fall into the category of the lust of the eyes. Greed, the idea that you never have enough. Stinginess or hoarding. I don't know if if you're a hoarder, you need a reality show and you need help. But when it comes to those people who just can't give stuff away, you've got all this junk, you just keep everything to yourself. It's a fear of losing your wealth. Maybe it's selfishness falls into this category. You never share what you have. You have something that could help someone else, but you're not willing to share, loan something to them. Envy, wanting what somebody else has, the idea that that's not fair, that rich people get to have what they have, spread the wealth around. Maybe we should have what we want too. And some people work for their stuff. Some people are cheats, and they cheat the system, and they cheat people, and God's going to judge them for that. But anytime that you have the idea, that's not fair, I want what they have, that's the lust of the eyes. That's the lust of the eyes. It's not a healthy way for us to live that way. Yeah, I think I've learned this, that the focus of your eyes determines the course of your life, the direction of your life. What you focus on, what you see, what your eyes are pointed at determines the course and the ultimate direction of where your life ends up. Years ago, whenever I used to skate, I was trying for probably at least a year to land a certain trick, and it was a 540-degree turn in the air. So I would jump, and I would try to spin and try to land. You do like a complete 360, and then you land backwards. And it was really hard. I could not do it. I could not figure it out. I'd hurt myself all the time. I had bruises on my hips all the time. And I finally talked to this guy at the skate park, and I was like, how do you land it? How do you land it every time? I can't get it. And he told me this. It stuck with me forever, just because I'm, a pastor now, and everything's an example. But he said, your head has to lead the rotation, because where your head goes, your body will follow. And I just remember that, and it worked. I did it, and like if your head leads it, you can end up landing the spin. Don't go necessarily try it. I will not try it. I am done. I am past that in my life. I will get hurt. But I realized that day that, man, it's so true. Like what your gaze is focused on is where you end up. The gaze of your eyes determines the course or the direction of your life. Jesus tells a story after he has an encounter with a man who's just not willing to give up everything he has to follow him. And this is what he ends up saying about our treasures, about the things in this life, the wealth that we have, that we acquire. He says in verse 19 of Matthew 6, don't store up your treasures here on earth. Sounds a lot like what John is saying. There are things of the world, and there are the things in the will of God. Don't store up your treasures here on earth in this world, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, where thieves break in and steal, but store up your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. For wherever your treasure is, let me interpret that, wherever your heart and therefore your gaze, your eyes is, there the desires of your heart will be also. Look what he says about the eye. He says your eye is like a lamp, and it provides light for the body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light. But when your eye is unhealthy, the whole body is filled with darkness. And if the light you think you have is actually darkness, then how deep that darkness is. No one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. Now, a lot of Christians have said that money is the root of all evil. It's misquoting Paul as he talks about that the love of money, the love of things, is really a root of all kinds of evil. And Jesus says here that your eye, what your gaze is on, what your focus on, it has the potential to bring darkness to the rest of your body. The lust of the eyes is not just I like to have nice things problem. It is everything else in my life becomes dark problem. And here's the problem. I love how he brings this out. He mentions if the light that you think you have is really darkness. I like how he says that, because oftentimes we think, what's the big deal with the lust of the eyes? I've earned it. I can afford this. I can buy whatever I have because I've got the money for it. It's not a matter of whether or not you have the money. I'm not talking about stewardship. It is a matter of feeding your soul with the things of this world. That's what Jesus warns us about. He says, just because you can have it doesn't mean you should. Because if you have everything that you want, there's no need for me. There's no desire for me. Jesus warns against this, and he says, be careful that your eye is not really darkness. It's a lamp to your body. It brings light or it brings darkness. What is your gaze focused on today? It's impossible to keep up with the Joneses, because it's always changing. A new family is going to move into town, and they're going to have something you don't have. And we look at the people around us in our neighborhood and our friends, and we think, man, if I had what they had, or to be a part of this crew, I got to have what they have. And, I've got to buy what they have, and I've got to own the same things, and I've got to have the same amount of kids. I've got to have whatever. We let our eyes determine the course of our life, but oftentimes it will get us off course from the will of God, and we end up doing the things that bring us pleasure, right? So Apple has recently, last year I think, released an iPhone upgrade program that makes all your wildest dreams come true. You can get whatever iPhone you want at any point. If you're tired of the one that you have, why? Because the screen is broken? No. Why? Because you have a scratch on the back? No. Why? Because the button stopped working? No. Do you want a new one? Yeah, I'd like a new one. You can have it. You can have whatever you want. All you've got to do is sign your name right here on the dotted line. Now, Brooke did it, and she's much less spiritual than me. But I have decided not to succumb to the temptation of the iPhone program. But I just bring it to the surface to say that, like, everything in this world says, do you want it? You can have it. Cash is sold, just swipe it. Do you know there's studies that say that whenever you give your cash, that whenever you actually pay with cash, it actually releases the same sensation in your brain that pain does? It hurts to give cash. Do you know that there is zero response whenever you swipe a card? You feel nothing. And everything in this world says, do you want it? You can have it, and it doesn't hurt at all. You can have it instantly. It's not even real money. Money? What money? Just put it on the other card. You can't afford it? Just put it on the other one. Just pile it up. Have whatever you want. And I think because of that, we have become slaves to the lender. And now that we're slaves to the lender, we can't give. We can't make a difference in the kingdom of God. We can't help whenever we see a family that's in need. Whenever we see somebody that could use the extra that we have. We don't have extra anymore because we're slaves to what our eye sees. The gaze of our eyes has stopped us from reaching and equipping and empowering not only the church, but people in need around us. What you have is so that you can be a blessing to other people. God told Abraham, I will bless you so you can be a blessing. We are blessed so we can bless people, so we can bless his church. I think this is crazy. And Jesus actually says in verse 8 of Luke 4, Jesus responds, as he does all three times, with Scripture. And Jesus says this, after Satan says, I have all this stuff and I'm going to give you everything. This is what Jesus says to him. Jesus says, you must worship the Lord your God and serve him only. So he calls God two names, and what he's doing is he's actually quoting again the Old Testament as we looked at last week. Jesus is quoting Deuteronomy 6 this time. So Jesus is quoting this verse right here. He says in Deuteronomy 6:13, honor the Lord your God and worship him only. Make your promises in his name alone. Jesus is quoting this to send Satan a message. Here's what Jesus is saying. In the Greek, I'm going to read what these words that Jesus said in the New Testament. This is what Jesus ended up saying. In the Greek, the word Lord is the word kurios, which means the possessor and disposer of a thing, the owner in a state, the sovereign prince, chief, Roman emperor. This is kind of the meaning of what this word is. So Jesus is saying, honor the Lord. The Lord is the one who possesses all things, who owns all things, who is the sovereign one, who is the prince and the chief. He's the one who's in charge. Then he says, he uses the word God, and this word is theos. In the Greek, it means the Godhead, the Trinity, the spoken of the only one true God. It refers to the things of God, things that are due to him. Jesus is reminding Satan, no, you don't own everything. I own everything. Because whenever the Bible says that the Lord your God, whenever it says to whenever it says to honor the Lord your God and make your promises only in his name, guess what? They're talking about me. Guess what? This verse is written about me. I own all things. Because not only does it say that God owns all things, but it says, hey, the second word, Trinity, I am God, and I can't get anything from you that I don't already have or that I don't have in God the Father. And I think that needs to be our revelation that we have every day, that there's nothing Satan can offer you, there's nothing that he can present before you, there's no temptation that he can lay before you that is truth at all, much less that will bring you any more satisfaction than what God gives. God owns everything. He owns everything that you want, everything that you really need. Now, we've got to separate this a little bit. What is the difference between your needs? God supplies for your needs. He takes care of your needs. He always has and he always will, but God doesn't take care of your lust. And I think oftentimes we end up praying prayers and we ask God to fulfill our lust. And we ask God, God, would you fulfill this lust of my flesh? I know you're good. I know you can do it. I know you're faithful, Lord. Would you give me this lust? And if you stop and think about the way that you pray, you'll see that you'll reveal that about yourself. You'll see, man, I'm praying some pretty self-centered prayers these days. And I think that God is very faithful to fulfill the needs that you have, but what are the differences between some of the needs that we have? I want to look at a couple stats that just kind of separate really America, our world, from the rest of the world. You know that 80% of humanity lives on less than $10 a day? 80% of humanity. When I was eating my all-I-can-eat sushi, That was one meal, and that was $15 for one meal. We live in a wealthy culture. We are a blessed people. 1.1 billion people have inadequate access to water. 1.1 billion people. They can't even get like a water. We're like, where's my water? I'm parched. Give me a bottle of water here. 1.1 billion people don't even have access to clean water. 2.6 billion people lack basic sanitation. And we're like, we out of toilet paper? We're fussing about that. They don't even have, there's no sanitation for 2.6 billion people in this world. And here's what the global priority has been. This was in 2014, this study was done in billions per year, global priority of things in billions per year. $8 billion in the U.S. was spent on cosmetics this last year, $8 billion. $11 billion was spent on ice cream in Europe. Somebody's like, amen, that was mostly me. $12 billion spent on perfumes in Europe and the United States. $17 billion spent on pet food in Europe and the United States. Now, some of you think that your pet has a soul and you've got to really take care of it and all, and they're like, I'm all about animal niceness, but there are people all around the world that aren't treated as well as your pets. $400 billion in narcotic drugs throughout the world. And here's some things that if we spent some money, this would fix the whole world, okay? If we spent $6 billion, it could provide basic education for everyone. If we spent $9 billion, water and sanitation could be provided for everyone. $13 billion could provide basic health and nutrition for everyone in the world. We're spending that on ice cream. I just bring this to the surface not to say, you evil person, you ate ice cream this week. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that there is a difference between your needs and your lust. There is a massive difference between those things. I love how Brooke and I are reading this book right now we just finished it by Francis and Lisa Chan. It's a marriage book that actually in June we've encouraged married couples to read it, and we're going to get together and have a marriage event and talk about it. But they talk a lot about how God provides for our needs, but not always our lust or our wants. This is what Francis Chan said in the book. He says this about building your own kingdom. He says, if you build your own kingdom, you might have a larger home or a nicer car and better food on earth, maybe, but you're on your own. You sacrifice knowing that God will provide for you regardless of what happens in our world. For those who seek His kingdom first, however, we never have to worry. And I think it's an amazing revelation that he says, look, he said there is more value in trusting in God than we give credit for. We often think, I just want to make sure that my stuff is taken care of, that my needs are met, that my kids have what they need. While all those things are good and legitimate needs and thoughts, don't try to do it yourself. You've got to understand, we've got to realize that there has to be a reliance on God for there to be a faithful relationship with Him. That's part of our relationship with God, is that we need Him. It's not just a thank you for fire insurance, I'll see you in heaven, but it is a God, I need you today. I need you right now. And you're not asking God to make up for your sloppy financial decisions and, oh God, could you help me pay my Visa bill? And God may help you with that, but you've got to have some discipline. There's stewardship, but when there's real needs in your life, you can ask God, God, provide these needs you know that we need. And what does that mean? What does it mean? Maybe you're going to be asking God for a few different things. Maybe you're going to eat, but you might not eat out. Eating out's not a need. Maybe you're going to have clothes, but they might not match. It's okay. Maybe you'll have water, but it won't be bottled. God provides for our needs, but we got to stop asking Him for our lust. This week, actually, just a few days ago, our grill had gone like, kind of just kaput, rusted out the back. Everything was falling out, dropping burgers on the floor and stuff. So I was like, I think it's time for a new one. So it lasted a few years, and I wanted to get a new grill. So I'm kind of like doing some research and shopping around for grills. And I run into Gavin actually at Lowe's a couple days ago. And I'm trying to buy this one grill. And he's like, man, just hold off. That one's not like a great grill. You might be able to find one at a better place. And I just think it was like a God moment just that we got to see each other because it stopped me from making an impulse purchase buying this grill. I was going to spend $200 for kind of a mini grill, a smaller grill. Well, I got home and I'm like, man, let me just see if there's anything on Craigslist. Now, I'll just set this up. I'm a little scared of Craigslist. And the reason is because Brian, our bass player, was robbed. He's right here. He was robbed at gunpoint a couple years ago selling iPhones. See, iPhone, boy, evil, hey, nothing good about. So I'm scared. I'm scared of Craigslist a little bit. So I text this person. I see this grill, $150 for this giant grill. I text this person and they're like, yeah, we've got the grill. And I'm like, okay, I'll go pick it up tomorrow morning because I'm like texting them at 8:30 at night. So I'm like, I'll go pick it up tomorrow morning. And they're like, why don't you come now? And I'm like, oh man, like it's dark. So I'm like starting to get nervous, and they're like, just come and get the grill right now because my husband's here tonight and he can help you put it in the truck, and we've got a large yard in the back and the shovel ready for you when you get here. And I'm just like, I'm starting to get real nervous. I drive over there, I get about 20 minutes. It's about 20 minutes out and I drive up, and as I'm like backing in, she comes out and I'm not trying to I don't judge people normally like this, but I'm scared, y'all. So I'm like, she's got tattoos all down her arm. This dude's got a nice ponytail with a big mustache. And I'm like, oh man, how you guys doing? And they're like, why don't you come through the house? And I'm like, all right. Yeah, I'll go through the house. Then she's like, are you scared of dogs? It's like, no, I'm not scared of anything at all. So I go to the door, and I am not kidding you. There are 2 Great Danes and a Mastiff in this house. These Great Danes are up to here, and this Mastiff is a tiny bit shorter, but makes up for it in size. And this dog, I'm not kidding you, good thing I had fresh underwear on. This dog starts barking at me, and this dog is like, ooh! Oh, and I'm like, I walk in and they're like, oh, he's fine, he's eating already. So I'm like, all right. So I walk in the house, and I'm kind of maneuvering my way through these dogs and fitting through, and I get on the back and the grill's there and it looks like the picture and it's in good shape. And I'm like, can you guys demo it? I mean, if you want to, if you want to show me it works. If not, I trust you completely. And so they tested for me right there and everything works fine. And we loaded in the truck, and I'm on my way home, and Brooke texts me. She's like, are you okay? And I'm like, if by okay you mean alive, then yes. I'm fine. And she sends back a little smiley face with a gun to the head. And I'm just like, no, I was fine, babe. But I was just like, I was thinking about that. I'm like, why would I subject myself to this kind of fear and torture? I think it's because just the culture of our family has just been, there might be something that we want right away. And we think we've got to have it, and I want the clean one, and I want the nice one, and I want it right now, and I want to have somebody load it up for me or whatever. But we force ourselves often to find the deal, to make much of what we have, to be good stewards of what we have, because we don't want to ever feed the lust of the eyes. I don't want to feed the idea that I can have what I want when I want it. You've got to crucify that desire inside of you. To defeat the lust of the eyes, you've got to think bigger than yourself. If you're going to defeat the lust of the eyes, you've got to think bigger than yourself. And what does that mean? That means that I think the number one way to defeat the lust of the eyes, the pull of the lust of your eyes, is to be a giver, to be someone who gives. Now, I'll make it easy for you. We need your help. We need your finances. This church operates on money. We need people to give. We need people who are committed to this church to say, hey, I believe in the vision. I want to help this church to reach people. I want you to give. Now, I'm not going to ever put anybody under pressure and say, you need to be giving. Why aren't you giving? I understand some of you are under financial pressure because you haven't been good stewards of your money. Or maybe you're just young and you're a college student and you're in that place in life. It doesn't matter. But I never want to put pressure on you. But if you're in a place where you've been blessed, why aren't you being a blessing? Not just to this church, but to people around you. What have you done lately for somebody else? What have you done lately? How have you given to someone else that has made their life better, that you've supplied some kind of, maybe an appliance that somebody needed, that you've given somebody something that you had abundance of? When's the last time you did that? And if you can't remember when you did it, or you know that you have a hard time doing it, then you're probably struggling with this lust of the eyes, which means you're thinking inward. And the best way to destroy this, the best way for you to defeat the lust of the eyes is for you to think bigger than yourself. Think bigger than yourself. Philippians 2, Paul writes this in verse 9. He says, therefore, about Jesus, and whenever you read therefore, you got to go look back at the verses before and see what is it there for. The Bible explains that Jesus was in heaven. He came down to this earth. He lived a perfect life as a man. He came to this earth and he served us. And as he served us, and he was crucified on a cross, the Bible says that because of what he did, because he served us and he gave everything that he had, he gave himself for us, therefore God elevated him to the place of highest honor and gave him the name above all other names, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue declare that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. You know that Jesus was in the desert, and when he's being tempted, do you know why Jesus didn't fall? He had seen heaven, but his gaze was focused on you. When Jesus was in the desert and Satan was tempting him and saying, come on, turn this stone into a bread. Come on, take all these communities, all of these cities, all of this wealth, take all of this. Come on, throw yourself off of this cliff. Won't God save you? When he's tempting Jesus with all these things, Jesus had his eyes on you. Jesus was focused on you because Jesus had a bigger picture than his own life. He was able to go to the cross. And even though it was agonizing pain and it was difficult, it was worth more to him to save you and me. How is your life focused on something bigger than yourself? How is your life focused on something larger than your immediate needs, your immediate lust and wants? I believe that the more that you give, the more God freely blesses. And the more that God freely supplies for every need that you ever have, you won't even have to ask. And I think oftentimes we have this idea, we have this tendency, God, should I give? Should I give to the church? God, should I give to the people? Should I help them out? Should I give something? I don't think you ever have to ask. You know, Paul says that the only time that you ask is ask in your heart, ask how much you should give. There's an amount, but there's never a question of whether you should give. There's never a question whether you give money to the church or give money to someone in need. When you see somebody who's in need and somebody who's hungry, you just feed them. That's what we do. That's what Christians do. We take care of people around us because Jesus took care of us. And that's who we are. Let your eyes, let your gaze be focused on something bigger than you.
Thank you for joining us for this week's message from Anchor Chapel. If you would like to support the ministry of Anchor Chapel, you can easily do so by visiting our website, anchorchapel.com. Also, follow us on social media at Anchor Chapel. We'll see you next week. God bless.